Hi everybody and welcome to my channel Speech with Shell. I'm an adult speech and language therapist and today I'm going to be sharing with you 5 simple tips when communicating with somebody who has aphasia. Aphasia is a language and communication disorder that often affects people after they've had a stroke or a brain injury, like a traumatic head injury. It can affect people in lots of different ways. So it can affect their ability to speak, so they're getting their message out. It can affect their understanding of language, so getting the message in. It can also affect their reading, their writing and their use of numbers. The most important thing to remember is that often people with aphasia still think the same and still have the same intelligence. They're still the same person, it just affects their language. I'm not going to go into too much information on what is aphasia in this video, however I will post some links below for a bit more information, so please do check those out. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Tip number 1 is using total communication strategies. So what the heck are those, I hear you ask? So speech and language therapists often refer to total communication strategies, and these are essentially just using any means of communication that you have available to you. These include things like gesture, so drink, eating, glasses, eye contact. They include facial expression, so for showing how we feel. They include pointing to something that's in the room, for example, to get somebody's attention. Head shaking and nodding for yes and no. Writing a word down, even drawing a picture if they can. There's lots of other ways as well, but these are sort of the main ones that we think about when we talk about total communication strategies. So there are 2 ways in which you can use these. So the first one really is to encourage the person with aphasia to use all of these means. Naturally and normally, we rely on our speech as our primary means of communication, but people with aphasia often can't do this, and so they have to really make use of all the tools in their toolbox to communicate what they're trying to say. So can they write the word down if they can't get it out, they're stuck on a word? Can they draw a picture? Is there an object or something in the room that relates to what they're saying? Can they mime it like I did before with the cup of tea to say I want a drink, that sort of thing? The second way in which you can use this is for you to use these yourself. So people with aphasia often have difficulty understanding language, like I said, getting that message in. And so for them, if you just speak at them, that might be quite difficult. So by using total communication strategies, you're supporting that person by providing them with lots of different cues to understand what you're saying. So that's a really good way to support people who have aphasia with communicating. Tip number 2 is using pictures and words, so using visuals. So words and speech are quite fleeting. They're gone as soon as you've said them. Whereas pictures and words written down are permanent, and so they really help with our memory. By using text and pictures, this can not only help the person by helping them to understand what you're trying to tell them, but it can also help so that they don't have to hold that word in their mind whilst they're trying to figure out what the heck it means. This is quite easy to do nowadays, especially if you've got a smartphone, because if you're communicating with a person with aphasia, you can look up on your phone a picture to show them on Google or something like that to support their understanding of what you're saying. So text and pictures are really great. Another way in which these can be helpful is to support that person with aphasia to get their message across and to tell you what they want to say. So as speech and language therapists, we often try and provide people with what we call communication books or boards, which are essentially lots of different pictures that are relevant to that person. So perhaps things that they really like to ask for, their favourite drinks, their favourite food. And so this helps them when they can't rely on their speech to point to pictures or to show people pictures. So visuals is a really great one to use. Tip number 3 is description. So many people with aphasia experience what we call word finding difficulties. So this is essentially when you know exactly what you want to say, the word is in there, but it just won't come out. And we've all experienced this from time to time. So when you know what you want to say and you're in that sort of tip of the tongue experience, and you know how frustrating that can be because for some reason there's just this block and we just can't access the word. People with aphasia can experience this constantly throughout conversations, so you can only try and imagine how frustrating that is. So description is a really good technique rather than getting frustrated and trying to get that word, to really encourage the person to talk around the word. Can they use a different word? Can they describe what it is that they want to say? So for instance, if I wanted to say the word clock and I just can't say it, I might say it's round, it's on the wall, it's got 2 hands, it's ticking, tick-tock, on my wrist, time. All of those clues, chances are if somebody said that to you, you would know that they're talking about a clock. And see what I did there, that I incorporated tip number 1, those total communication strategies of the miming and the gesture, sound effects of the tick-tock, pointing to my watch, those sorts of things really boosted someone's ability to understand what it is that I'm trying to say. So this is a really helpful strategy when you get into the hang of it. So encouraging people to describe around the word rather than just focusing on that word is a really great tip. Tip number 4 is asking simple yes/no questions, especially for somebody who has quite severe aphasia, who perhaps has no speech, and maybe they can say yes or no, or maybe they can at least nod or shake their head to respond. Asking simple questions that only require a yes/no response is a really easy way to sort of help that person express their needs and their wants. So, do you want a cup of tea? Are you comfortable? Are you in pain? Are you cold? And another way that this can be used is going back to tip number 3 about word finding difficulties. When someone's stuck on a word, it can be helpful really to ask simple yes/no questions to guess what it is that they're trying to say. So, is it a long word or is it a short word? Is it something that we've been talking about or is it something new? Do bear in mind though that not everybody likes you guessing what they're trying to say when they're stuck. Some people really find that irritating and they'd much prefer to get there by themselves without you jumping in and guessing. So make sure that you just check with that person first that they're happy for you to do this. And finally, tip number 5 is keeping your speech short and simple. People with aphasia often have difficulty understanding what you're trying to say to them. And so by keeping your speech nice and short, nice and simple, and not giving too much information at once, you're really just giving them more time to process what you're saying to them. It is really important though to make sure that you're not talking down to the person and you're not really treating them like a child, because like I said earlier, aphasia doesn't tend to affect your intelligence or your intelligence or your thinking. It's still the same person that you're used to talking to. So try and be sort of as simple but as natural as possible when you're talking to someone with aphasia. For example, I might say to somebody, or you might want to say to somebody, "Hiya Joe, so what do you want for tea tonight? We've got lamb, we've got beef, we've got chicken, pork, or you could even have soup or something different." Stop right there. So you've just given so much information in one go, and that's a lot for somebody to process. Imagine that you're in a restaurant. If you've ever been in a restaurant and you're sat down and you've asked the waiter what the specials are of that day, and they really just list them all out to you quite quickly and just using their speech, so you're not looking at anything either. It can be quite challenging for you, 1, to process everything that they're saying really quickly, and 2, to try and keep that in your mind and remember what those are. And that's difficult for somebody who doesn't have aphasia. So you can see how this might be difficult for them and pose a challenge for them when trying to sort of break down what it is you're asking. So rather than giving all that information, just break it down and put in pauses. So you could say, "Hiya Joe," using the gestures and total communication strategies. "What do you want for tea? You've got beef or we've got pork?" And this sort of leads me on to a bit of a bonus tip, which is give options, give choices, beef or pork. And you could even use visuals and pictures of each thing to help support their communication. You could even use the physical objects. You could even use a communication book. So like I said earlier, lots of pictures of all of the options to support that person, not only to understand what you're asking of them, but also if they can't use their speech, for them to communicate back to you what it is that they want. Either they can point to your hand, beef or pork, or they can point to the pictures which you're physically using. So that's another tip. So just to recap that one, keep your speech nice and slow, nice and simple, and don't give too much information at once, but make sure to be natural. Don't speak down to the person and give them choices. So that does bring me to the end of this video. Before I go though, I will say I really urge you to get in contact with a speech and language therapist. They'll be able to provide you with much more tailored, much more personalised advice and support for the person with aphasia and yourself and their whole situation. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to comment below any of your experiences, or even maybe you have some different tips that you found really helpful. Thanks again, and see you next time.